The morning sun painted golden stripes across the marble floors of the Harrison mansion when everything changed. Marcus Harrison stood in the doorway of his massive kitchen, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his face showing no emotion at all. He watched as Elena Martinez carefully washed the breakfast dishes, her hands moving in gentle circles under the warm water. She hummed a soft melody that reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. Maybe happiness, maybe hope, maybe something his house had forgotten long ago. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and the cinnamon rolls she had baked for his daughter, Sophie. Marcus cleared his throat, and the words that came out of his mouth surprised even him. "Elena, I need you to be my girlfriend. Not real, just pretend. For 1 month, I'll pay you $75,000. The plate in Elena's hands almost slipped into the soapy water. She turned around slowly, her dark brown eyes wide with shock, water dripping from her fingertips onto the expensive floor tiles. Elena had been working in the Harrison mansion for 6 months now, ever since she arrived in the city with nothing but a suitcase and a dream to save enough money for her mother's cancer treatment back in Mexico. Every morning, she would arrive, before the sun came up, preparing breakfast for Marcus and his 8-year-old daughter Sophie, cleaning the 20-room mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. She had noticed how the house seemed to echo with loneliness, how Sophie's laughter was the only warm sound in all those cold hallways. Marcus never smiled, never stayed for breakfast, never asked about her day. He was like a shadow moving through his own life, present, but not really there. Now he stood before her with this strange request that made no sense at all. "Mr. Harrison, I don't understand," Elena said quietly, reaching for a dish towel to dry her shaking hands. "Why would you need someone to pretend to be your girlfriend? You could have anyone you want. You're successful, handsome, and you have everything." Marcus walked closer, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. But he stopped at a safe distance, like he always did, as if getting too close to anyone might break something inside him. "The board of directors at my company doesn't trust me," Marcus explained, his voice flat and businesslike, like he was discussing a merger instead of asking his maid to pretend to love him. "They think because I'm a widower raising a daughter, alone, I'm unstable, emotional, not focused enough on the business. There's a man named Richard Blackstone who wants to take over my position. He's been spreading rumors that I'm falling apart, that I can't handle the pressure anymore. Next week is the annual shareholders gala, and if I show up alone again, they might vote me out. I built this company from nothing after Catherine died. It's all I have left of who I used to be. I can't lose it too." Elena watched his face carefully, searching for any sign of the human being beneath the cold exterior. She had seen him once, late at night, sitting in Sophie's room while the little girl slept, holding a picture of his late wife, and crying silently. She had backed away without him knowing, but that image had stayed with her. The image of a man carrying grief like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. "But why me?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just your housekeeper. I don't belong in your world. I don't know how to act at fancy parties or talk to rich people. I don't even have the right clothes." Marcus's expression softened just slightly, so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. "That's exactly why it has to be you. You're real, genuine, unlike everyone else in my world who wears masks and plays games. Sophie trusts you, talks about you all the time. She hasn't connected with anyone like this since her mother died 3 years ago. The board will see that you're good for us, for our family, and I'll handle everything else. The clothes, the coaching on what to say, all of it. You just have to be yourself, just warmer, toward me in public." Elena thought about her mother lying in a hospital bed thousands of miles away, about the bills piling up, about the treatment that could save her life if only Elena had the money. $75,000 would change everything. But she also thought about Sophie, sweet little Sophie, who drew pictures of families with 3 people and always made. The mommy figure have dark hair like Elena's, The silence stretched between them like a tightrope, delicate and dangerous. Alina could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, could hear Sophie's cartoons playing upstairs, could hear her own heart beating faster than it should. There would be rules, she finally said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. No kissing unless absolutely necessary for the act. No touching beyond holding hands or a respectful arm around the shoulder. And Sophie needs to understand this is temporary, that I'm not trying to replace her mother. I won't lie to that little girl or give her false hope. Marcus nodded quickly, almost eagerly, like a drowning man grabbing for a life preserver. Of course, I'll draw up a contract with everything spelled out clearly. This is purely a business arrangement. 1 month, starting this weekend at the gala, ending after the board meeting where they'll vote on my future. After that, you can continue working here if you want, or take the money and leave. No questions asked, no hard feelings. Alina looked down at her hands, rough from years of hard work. So different from the manicured hands of the women Marcus usually encountered. She thought about how strange life was. How she had come to this country to clean houses, and now she was being asked to pretend to love a man who seemed to have forgotten how to love anything at all. I need to think about it, she said softly. This is a big decision, Mr. Harrison. Can I give you my answer tomorrow? Marcus nodded, already turning to leave, retreating back into his armor of distance and professionalism. But at the doorway, he paused and looked back. Alina, he said, and for the first time, her name sounded different on his lips, softer somehow. I know this is strange. I know I'm asking a lot, but I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. Then he was gone, leaving Alina alone in the kitchen with the sunlight and the soap suds, and a decision that would change everything. That night, Alina sat in her tiny apartment on the other side of the city, a world away from the Harrison mansion. She called her sister Rosa back home and told her about the offer, speaking in rapid Spanish, her voice rising and falling with uncertainty. Rosa was practical, always had been. Take the money, Alina. Mama needs the treatment, and this man is offering you more than you could save in 5 years. So what if you have to pretend for a month? You've been pretending to be happy there anyway. But it wasn't that simple, and Alina knew it. She had seen the way Marcus looked at Sophie when he thought no one was watching, with such fierce love and desperate fear, like he was terrified of losing her too. She had noticed how he kept Catherine's pictures everywhere, but never looked at them directly, like the pain was too bright to face head-on. She had watched him work until midnight every night, filling the empty hours with spreadsheets and conference calls so he wouldn't have to feel the silence. This wasn't just about pretending to be his girlfriend. This was about stepping into a broken family and trying not to cut herself on all the sharp edges of their grief. The next morning, Alina arrived at the mansion earlier than usual. She found Marcus in his study, already dressed for work, even though the sun had barely risen. He looked up when she knocked, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, hope, maybe, or fear. They looked almost the same on him. I'll do it, she said simply, but I want something else besides the money. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his business instincts immediately activated. What else do you want? I want you to have dinner with Sophie every night during this month, Alina said firmly. Real dinner, not just sitting there checking your phone while she eats. I want you to ask her about her day, help her with homework, read her a bedtime story at least 3 times a week. She needs her father, Mr. Harrison, not just a provider. If I'm going to pretend to care about you, then you need to actually care about what matters most. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Alina thought he might refuse, might withdraw the offer entirely. But then something shifted in his expression, like a door opening just a crack. Fine, he said quietly. You have a deal. The preparation for the gala began immediately. Marcus hired a personal shopper who arrived with racks of elegant dresses, shoes that cost more than Elena's monthly rent, and jewelry that made her nervous just to touch. A hairstylist transformed, her long dark hair into sophisticated waves, and a makeup artist taught her how to apply cosmetics that enhanced rather than masked her natural beauty. But the hardest part was learning to move in Marcus's world. He taught her which fork to use at formal dinners, how to make small talk about stocks and markets, how to smile when people said things that made no sense to her. They practiced in his living room, Marcus playing the role of various board members, while Alina learned to navigate conversations about things she'd never thought about before. During one of these sessions, Sophie wandered in, curious about why Alina was wearing such a fancy dress. "Are you going to marry my daddy?" the little girl asked innocently, and the room fell silent. Alina knelt down to Sophie's level, her borrowed designer dress pooling around her. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy and I are just friends who are helping each other out. Like when you help your friend at school with math, and they help you with reading." Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, but Alina caught Marcus watching them with an expression she couldn't read. The night of the gala arrived. Like a storm everyone could see coming, but no one could stop. Alina stood in front of the full-length mirror in one of the mansion's guest rooms, barely recognizing herself. The midnight blue gown hugged her figure perfectly. The delicate silver jewelry caught the light with every movement, and her reflection looked like someone who belonged in Marcus's world. But her hands shook as she applied the last touch of lipstick, and her heart raced like she was about to jump off a cliff. Marcus knocked softly and entered, stopping short when he saw her. For a moment, he just stared, and Alina saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Genuine surprise, maybe even admiration. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a movie, his usually stern face softened by something that might have been nervousness. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, and it didn't sound like part of the act. "Thank you," Alina replied, smoothing down her dress unnecessarily. "I feel like I'm wearing a costume." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "Everyone at these things is wearing a costume," he said. "The only difference is, most of them have forgotten it's not real." The hotel ballroom where the gala was held took Elena's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the marble floors. An orchestra played classical music she recognized but couldn't name. And everywhere she looked there were people who seemed to be made of money and confidence. Marcus kept his hand on the small of her back as they entered, a touch so light she might have imagined it, but it grounded her, kept her from running away. "Remember," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear, "you belong here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." The first test came immediately. Richard Blackstone approached them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, his wife draped in diamonds beside him. "Marcus, what a surprise. And who is this lovely creature?" he asked, his gaze sliding over Alina in a way that made her skin crawl. Marcus's hand tightened slightly on her back. "This is Alina, my girlfriend," he said smoothly. "Alina, this is Richard Blackstone and his wife, Victoria." Alina extended her hand with the grace she'd practiced. "Pleased to meet you," she said, her accent barely noticeable after weeks of practice. "Marcus has told me so much about the company. It must be exciting to be part of such innovation." Richard's eyes sharpened with interest. "And what do you do, Alina?" This was the question they'd prepared for, but Alina decided to go off script. "I teach children," she said truthfully, thinking of how she'd been teaching Sophie to cook, to speak Spanish, to laugh again. But more importantly, I help Marcus remember that there's life outside of boardrooms and spreadsheets. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with, don't you think? Victoria Blackstone actually smiled genuinely at this. "How refreshing," she said. "Marcus, you should bring Alina around more often. Lord knows these events could use someone who remembers what really matters." As they moved through the crowd, Alina felt Marcus relax beside her. She met board members and their spouses, discussed everything from art to education, and found that being herself, with just a little polish, was enough. People seemed drawn to her warmth, her genuine interest in their lives beyond their bank accounts. She caught Marcus watching her several times, something unreadable in his expression. The pivotal moment came during dinner. Alina was seated between Marcus and an elderly board member named Mr. Whitman, who had been asking her about her background. She told him about growing up in a small town in Mexico, about her mother who taught her to cook, about coming to America with big dreams and hard work. Mr. Whitman listened intently, and then said something that made the whole table go quiet. "Marcus, this young woman has more courage in her little finger than most of us have in our entire bodies. Coming to a new country, starting over with nothing but determination. That's the kind of strength that built this company in the first place. Don't you dare let her go." Marcus looked at Alina then, really looked at her, and she saw something crack in his carefully constructed walls. "I don't intend to," he said, softly, and for a moment, Alina forgot they were pretending. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing and conversation. Marcus was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her through waltzes with a grace she hadn't expected. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, as they swayed to a slow song. Catherine loved to dance, he said quietly, and it was the first time he'd said his late wife's name without flinching. "She made me take lessons before our wedding. Said she didn't want me stepping on her dress." Alina could have left it there, kept things surface level, but something made her press on. "Tell me about her," she said gently. Marcus tensed for a moment, then relaxed, like he'd made a decision. "She was nothing like me," he said, his voice soft enough that only Alina could hear. "She laughed at everything, even my terrible jokes. She could make friends with anyone, from the CEO to the janitor. She made our house feel alive. When she died, it was like someone turned off all the lights and I forgot where the switches were." Alina's heart ached for him, for Sophie, for the family that had been shattered. "The lights are still there, Marcus," she said softly. "Sophie needs you to help her find them again. She's so much like her mother, from what I can see. That spark, that joy. But she's afraid to show it, because she thinks it might make you sadder." Marcus stopped dancing, just stood there in the middle of the floor, holding her hands. "How do you know that?" he asked. "Because she told me," Alina said simply. "Children understand more than we think. She sees you hurting and doesn't want to make it worse. But Marcus, your grief is teaching her that loving someone means never recovering when you lose them. Is that what Catherine would want?" Something shifted in Marcus's face. A recognition, a pain, a possibility. As the weeks passed, the lines between pretend and real began to blur in dangerous ways. Marcus kept his promise about dinners with Sophie, and Alina often stayed to cook for them, turning it into a family affair, even though that wasn't part of their agreement. She taught them both to make tamales, laughing as Marcus struggled with the corn husks, his usually perfect hands, clumsy with this unfamiliar task. Sophie bloomed under the attention, chattering about school, showing her father her drawings, even convincing him to help build a blanket fort one rainy Saturday. Alina watched from the kitchen doorway as Marcus crawled into the fort with Sophie, his expensive suit getting wrinkled, his face lighter than she'd ever seen it. He caught her watching and smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. And Alina felt her heart do something dangerous in her chest. This was supposed to be pretend, but her feelings were becoming terrifyingly real. She tried to maintain distance, to remember this was temporary, but every day made it harder. Like when Marcus started leaving her little notes with her morning supplies, just simple things like, "Thank you for making Sophie laugh yesterday," or "The lavender soap you chose is perfect." Or when he defended her fiercely at a company dinner where someone made a snide comment about immigration. The crisis came 3 weeks into their arrangement. Alina got a call from Rosa in the middle of the night. Their mother had taken a turn for the worse, and the doctors needed to perform surgery immediately. The cost would be astronomical, even with the money Marcus was paying her. Alina sat in her apartment crying, feeling helpless and far from home, when her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Sophie had a nightmare," he said. "She's asking for you. I know it's late, but could you come?" Alina wiped her tears and drove to the mansion, finding Sophie curled up in her father's arms, both of them looking lost. "Alina," Sophie cried, reaching for her. "I dreamed you went away forever like Mommy did." Alina gathered the little girl into her arms, feeling Marcus watching them. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere," she soothed, even though she knew it was a lie. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep between them on the couch, Marcus noticed Alina's red eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked with genuine concern. Alina tried to brush it off, but the exhaustion and fear broke through her defenses. She told him about her mother, about the surgery, about feeling like she was failing the one person who had always been there for her. Marcus listened in silence, then stood up abruptly and left the room. Alina thought she had upset him somehow, crossed a line by sharing her personal problems. But he returned with his laptop and checkbook. "How much do you need?" he asked simply. "Marcus, no," Alina protested. "That's not what this is about. We have an agreement, and you're already paying me generously." But Marcus shook his head. "This isn't about our agreement. This is about Sophie loving you, and you needing help." "How much, Alina?" she told him, her voice barely a whisper, and he wrote the check without hesitation. "Consider it in advance on your next year's salary," he said, "because I want you to stay after this month is over. Not as my fake girlfriend, but as part of our household. Sophie needs you, and so do I. Maybe not in the way I thought, but in a way that matters more." Alina stared at the check, then at Marcus, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't just gratitude or kindness. It was something deeper. Something that looked dangerously like the feelings she'd been trying to suppress. The final week of their arrangement arrived with the most important board meeting of Marcus's career. Richard Blackstone had been maneuvering behind the scenes, trying to convince board members that Marcus was too distracted, too emotional since his wife's death to lead effectively. But something had changed in Marcus over the past month. He was still driven, still brilliant, but there was a warmth to him now that made people want to follow him rather than fear him. The night before the meeting, Marcus found Alina in the garden, sitting on the bench where she often took her breaks. The sunset painted everything gold, and she looked like she belonged there, in his world, in his life. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something," he said, sitting beside her, closer than professional distance would dictate. "This month with you has taught me something I thought I'd forgotten. How to live, not just exist. How to be a father, not just a provider. How to feel again, even when it scares me." Alina turned to look at him, and the space between them seemed to shrink. "Marcus," she whispered, but he continued. "I know this was supposed to be fake, a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. The way you look at Sophie, the way you've brought light back into our home, the way you challenge me to be better, it's all real for me now." Alina's eyes filled with tears. "I stopped pretending to," she admitted. "But Marcus, I'm your housekeeper. I don't have a college degree. I'm not from your world. People will talk. They'll judge. And what about Sophie? What if this doesn't work, and she loses someone else she loves?" Marcus reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Sophie asked me something yesterday," he said. "She asked if you could be her mom for real, not just pretend. And you know what I realized? I want that too. Not because I need someone to replace Catherine, but because you've shown us that hearts can expand. That loving someone new doesn't diminish the love we had before." Alina squeezed his hand, her heart racing. "This is crazy," she said, but she was smiling through her tears. "The best things usually are," Marcus replied, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. There in the garden, as the sun set and the future spread out before them, uncertain but no longer frightening, the board meeting the next day was decisive. Marcus presented his vision for the company with a passion and clarity that reminded everyone why they'd chosen him to lead in the first place. When Richard Blackstone tried to bring up Marcus's personal life, suggesting he was unstable, Marcus stood tall and spoke from his heart. "Yes, I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said, his voice strong and clear. "It nearly destroyed me. But I've learned that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about finding reasons to stand back up. My daughter is my reason. This company that we've all built together is my reason. And yes, the woman I love is my reason. Not because she makes me forget my grief, but because she's taught me that joy and sorrow can exist in the same heart. That moving forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind." The board voted overwhelmingly to keep Marcus as CEO, and Richard Blackstone's attempt at a takeover failed completely. But Marcus barely noticed the victory. All he could think about was getting home to Alina and Sophie, to the family that had formed when he wasn't looking. Built not on pretense, but on something real and unexpected and worth fighting for. 6 months later, the Harrison mansion was transformed, not just physically, though Alina had added touches of warmth everywhere. From colorful artwork, to cozy reading nooks, to a kitchen that always smelled like something delicious cooking. The real transformation was in the feeling of the place. It was a home now, filled with laughter, and arguments and movie nights, and homework sessions, and all the beautiful chaos of a family. Alina had officially moved in, not as the housekeeper, but as Marcus's fiancée, though she still insisted on cooking because she loved it. Sophie called her mom now, not to replace the mother she'd lost, but to honor the mother she'd gained. Marcus had learned to leave work at reasonable hours, to be present for bedtime stories and weekend adventures. He'd even started teaching Alina about business, discovering she had a natural instinct for understanding people that made her brilliant at negotiations. They were planning 2 weddings. One elegant affair for the business world, and one colorful celebration with Elena's family in Mexico. Because their love story deserved to be celebrated in both the worlds they came from. The night before their wedding, Alina found Marcus in Sophie's room, watching their daughter sleep. She slipped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Are you happy?" she whispered. Marcus turned in her arms, his eyes soft with love. "I never thought I'd be happy again," he admitted. "I thought that part of my life ended with Catherine. But you've taught me that happiness isn't something that runs out. It's something that grows when you share it." Alina smiled, remembering that morning months ago when he'd asked her to pretend to be his girlfriend. How impossible it had all seemed. Who would have thought that a fake relationship could lead to something so real, she said. Marcus kissed her forehead, holding her close. "Maybe it was never fake," he said. "Maybe we were both just pretending not to need exactly what we found in each other." As they stood there in the quiet nursery, with Sophie sleeping peacefully and their future spreading out before them, Alina thought about the title of their unlikely love story. Single Dad CEO asks his maid to pretend to be his fake girlfriend, done unexpectedly. She'd steal his heart, but she knew the truth was even better. They had stolen each other's hearts, rebuilt a family from the ashes of grief, and proved that love doesn't always come in the packages we expect. Sometimes it arrives in an ordinary morning, in a desperate request, in the courage to say yes to an impossible proposition. Sometimes it grows in the spaces between pretense and truth, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. And sometimes, just sometimes, the love you never saw coming is exactly the love you needed all along. Their story would continue, with all its imperfect moments and unexpected joys, because real love isn't about the grand gestures or the perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day, through burnt dinners and board meetings, through bedtime stories and business deals, through tears and laughter, and everything in between. Marcus and Alina had started with a lie, and found their way to the deepest truth that love isn't something you can fake. When it's real, it transforms everything it touches, turning houses into homes, strangers into family, and broken hearts into whole ones. Different than before, but beautiful in their imperfection. The wedding day dawned, bright and clear. And as Alina walked down the aisle in a dress that was both elegant and simple, she saw Marcus waiting for her with Sophie by his side, both of them crying happy tears. The vows they exchanged were honest about their journey, about how they'd found each other in the most unexpected way, about how pretending to love had taught them what real love looked like. "You asked me to pretend," Alina said during her vows, her voice strong and clear, "but I discovered that my heart doesn't know how to pretend. Every smile, every touch, every moment became real because you and Sophie made me remember who I really am. Not the housekeeper, not the fake girlfriend, but someone worthy of love, capable of healing, and brave enough to believe in second chances." Marcus's vows were equally moving. "I thought I was hiring someone to play a role," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you refused to just play along. You demanded more from me, from us. You brought light into our darkness, not by pretending our grief didn't exist, but by showing us that joy could live alongside it. You didn't just steal my heart, Alina. You helped me find it again." As they kissed to seal their union, Sophie ran up to hug them both, and the photographer captured the moment that perfectly encapsulated their story. Three people who had found each other in loss and built something beautiful from the pieces. The reception was a blend of both their worlds, with mariachi music alternating with classical strings, tacos served alongside caviar, and speeches in both English and Spanish that celebrated not just the couple, but the courage it takes to love after loss, to trust after betrayal, to build a family from unexpected beginnings. Elena's mother, recovered from her surgery and radiant with joy, danced with Marcus's father, who had flown in from London, and in their careful steps was the same bridging of worlds that Marcus and Alina represented. As the evening wound down, Marcus pulled Alina aside for a private moment on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Alina asked, leaning into his embrace. "For saying yes to that crazy proposal," he said, "for seeing past my walls, for loving Sophie, for teaching me that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as impossible requests from desperate people who don't even know what they're really asking for." Alina laughed, the sound bright and free. "Thank you for being desperate enough to ask your maid to be your fake girlfriend," she said. "It's not every day a girl gets such a romantic proposal while washing dishes." They both laughed then, remembering that awkward morning that had changed everything. "I love you," Marcus said, his voice serious now. "Not because I need you for board meetings or because Sophie adores you, though both those things are true. I love you because you make me want to be the man you already somehow see in me." Alina touched his face gently. "And I love you because you've shown me that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about being brave enough to ask for help, even when that help comes in the most unexpected form." As they danced there on the balcony, just the two of them under the stars, Alina thought about all the people who would hear their story and think it was too unlikely, too much like a fairy tale. But she knew the truth. Real love stories aren't perfect. They're messy and complicated and full of false starts and mistakes. They require courage and faith and the willingness to risk your heart on something that started as pretend, but became the most real thing in your life. The story of the single dad CEO who asked his maid to pretend to be his fake girlfriend would be told at dinner parties and family gatherings for years to come. But for Marcus, Alina, and Sophie, it was simply the beginning of their happily ever after. Imperfect and challenging and absolutely worth every moment of uncertainty that had brought them together. As they went back inside to their reception, to their family and friends, and the life they were building together, Alina whispered one last thing to Marcus. You know, for a fake relationship, this feels pretty real. Marcus spun her around, dipped her dramatically, and kissed her in front of everyone. It was always real, he said when they came up for air. We just needed a month of pretending to figure it out. And in that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, and the promise of tomorrow, they both knew that sometimes the best love stories begin with the words, "Let's pretend." Because in the space between fake and real, between what we plan and what happens, between the roles we play and the people we truly are, that's where the magic lives. That's where broken hearts learn to beat again, where families are rebuilt from ashes and hope, where a simple maid and a lonely CEO discover that love doesn't care about social status or perfect timing or logical sense. Love just needs two people brave enough to stop pretending they don't need each other and start admitting they can't imagine life apart. Their story would continue long after the wedding ended, through first anniversaries and Sophie's school plays, through business triumphs and family challenges, through the adoption of Elena's cousin who needed a home, and the birth of the twins neither of them expected, but both immediately adored. It would be a life built on the strange foundation of a business arrangement that became a love story. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. And whenever anyone asked them how they met, Marcus and Elena would exchange a knowing smile and say, "He asked me to be his fake girlfriend, and unexpectedly, I stole his heart." But they both knew the truth was even better. They had saved each other, one pretend date at a time, until pretending became living and living became loving and loving became the forever they never saw coming but couldn't imagine living without.